The MTA has a problem with fare evasion, with them estimating about $500 million in lost revenue due to fare evasion in just 2022 alone. So in April, it was announced that the MTA will be organizing a blue ribbon panel to examine the issue of fare evasion and to deliver a report with suggestions on how to deal with this issue that's been eating away at the agency's operating budget for years now. It has forever, really, but it's especially important now with the MTA on the hook for billions of dollars that it needs to make up from somewhere. On the surface, it's a no-brainer campaign to stop fare beaters and generate billions of dollars in desperately needed funding that would otherwise just be lost. But who gets caught in the crossfire when the MTA has to contend with this multi-billion-dollar funding deficit with no real plan in place from the MTA's board, the governor, or the mayor in place to deal with it besides fare hikes, service cuts, and, of course, fare enforcement? Riders who struggle to afford their fares and often evade fares to access transit represent a unique demographic that can very well be scapegoated for MTA's financial woes, with the victimless crime of fare evasion being used as pretext to apprehend, search, arrest, or otherwise engage with these riders as criminals. Take, for example, Victor Walker. He's a rider from the Bronx who often struggles to afford his fare and has resorted to fare evasion to get where he needs to be, which includes accessing life-saving healthcare services.
I was having a mental health crisis, and my therapist is in Brooklyn. And I was going to stay home because I didn't have a Metro card. And I said, well, if I stay home, I feel like I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm going to do something unacceptable for me. And I went to the subway station and I waited for someone to leave the door open, and I walked through. But no sooner than I walked through, two cops came and snatched me up and said, hey, we're going to ticket you for fare evasion. I have a $150 ticket to this day because I made a decision not to end my life or hurt myself. I decided to go through the doors. And I don't think that that's a fair decision to have to make. To be ticketed for it, I understand the system, the process, the way things work, but I shouldn't have to decide that I can't go to my therapist in a mental health crisis because I don't have the money to swipe a card.
So what can actually be done about all of this? Well, A, we can expand transit affordability programs like Fair Fares, which offers half-price Metro cards or eventually Omni cards to New Yorkers living below the federal poverty level, which is $13,590 for individuals and $27,750 for families of four. If that doesn't sound like a lot of money, it's because it isn't. The current income threshold makes it so that many New Yorkers that nobody would disagree are living in poverty aren't able to access the Fair Fares program. My colleague and senior organizer at Riders Alliance, Dana Dennis, can attest to that as somebody who has in the past struggled with transit affordability while working in poverty.
All the way up into 2017, I can remember making $10 an hour as a home health aide. I had a lot of cases all over New York. I'd have to travel from anywhere from Brooklyn to the Bronx to Queens for various caseloads, having to be there very early in the morning to get to my clients. And, a lot of that was dependent on transit. I was taking the train, I was taking the bus crosstown, 2 to 3 hour commutes, hoping that my transfer would get me across to where I needed to go. I've had days where I've had to ask people to swipe me in, or I'd had to take the bus instead of the train to say to a bus driver, hey, can I get on? Because I just don't have it. I'm trying to get to work. They would see me dressed in my scrubs, know that I'm trying to get to work, and, have some type of pity on me. But that's humbling. That's embarrassing. That's not something that I should have to do or any rider should have to do. People really, unfortunately, think that they know what poverty looks like. Poverty can be silent. So you are managing the bare necessities, which usually for people are shelter and food. As a home health aide, I had just finally gotten a raise from $10 to $11 an hour. Functioning under the high stress of being at the turnstile, not knowing if I have enough money to get to work, not knowing I have enough money to eat while I'm at work, and not knowing if I have enough money to get back home to the home that I can barely afford. That's the way that a lot of New Yorkers are functioning, and it's scary. We have over 271,000 riders in New York who are already using the program. So if we raise it just by a little bit, just by a few thousand, which is still someone struggling, you would get a lot more riders who are able to get help, a lot more riders who are in need, and it would be, I think, a little more equal to what we're feeling in New York City versus what people may be feeling in another state. If you're just over that by $1, just over the amount that is qualifying factor, that's it. It's a yes or no, and that's hard. I definitely think we need to be shouting fair fares from the rooftop. I think if folks are being arrested for fare evasion and criminalized for poverty, then we need to figure out how we can also get this person to apply for the program.
As it is, the Fair Fares program is still leaving hundreds of thousands or even millions of New Yorkers with no choice but to choose between paying for transit or affording other necessities like food, housing, and healthcare. Expanding Fair Fares eligibility to at least 200% of the federal poverty level would instantly reduce the necessity of fare fare evasion by offering affordable access to transit for those that need it. On top of expanding fare fares to allow more people to qualify, more should also be done to make sure that people that are eligible for the program are aware of it and have the support they need to make applying for the program as easy and accessible as possible.
If my mom didn't have someone like me who's tech savvy and who knows where to find these resources, then she'd be out of luck. Because she speaks Chinese only, and it's very, very challenging for her to get access or even awareness of the resources when they're mostly done in English and also broadcasted online. There are a lot of programs, but there's really not much accessibility to them in the sense of actually spreading awareness of the programs to the communities it's supposed to serve. Especially for older immigrants like my mom, if you want to have better outreach to these people, you have to understand all these different ethnic groups and where they congregate, and then that's the place where you can actually spread awareness the best.
Right now, according to CSS, only 50% of eligible New Yorkers that they polled have applied for the Fair Fares program, meaning it's evident we need a targeted, well-funded outreach plan that can meet eligible riders where they're at. The good news is that there has been some success with the current outreach efforts when they do employ this kind of targeted outreach.
I have to sometimes choose between paying the fare and making sure I pay all my other bills. Sometimes I just don't have enough to pay the full price. I think it was like a year or two ago that I ended up applying for a half-fare Metro card so that I could be able to better afford the subway and I don't have to, worry about, if I pay the $275, I'm not going to have enough money to get this. Well, I actually became aware of the program in a shelter. I was in a shelter and I didn't even know about it until someone told me to apply for food stamps and stuff. And as I was doing that, it said I could apply for fair fares too. And I applied for that as well, and then I waited for the Metro card to come in the mail, and it was a big help because it saves me money. Because I didn't even know that I was entitled to get food stamps. I didn't even know that I could get that. So once they introduced me to that, that's when they mentioned, you can also get a Metro card too.
B, the second thing that we can do, and arguably the thing that has to happen, is elected leaders on the local, state, and federal level have to commit to fully funding transit like the public service that it is. In New York City alone, millions of people depend on transit daily, so it should go without saying that funding that transit system is a matter of public welfare, and it should not be required to generate its own revenue to continue operating, especially if that forces the MTA to literally go after riders to get the funding that it needs. So, to conclude all of this, while yes, the Fairness Panel's goals make sense in theory, the problem of unaffordable transit and unsustainable funding models isn't a matter of criminal justice or engineering unhoppable turnstiles. It's a matter of having the political will to fund transit like the public service that it is, but also to treat transportation like the universal necessity that everyone should have access to regardless of their ability to pay for it up front.